The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe follows the point of view of a madman as he tells a tale in order to convince the reader that he is, in fact, not mad. He tells about the old man who he lives with. While he loves the man, he is haunted by what he calls his vulture eye, which is pale blue and clouded over. For 7 nights, he sneaks into the old man's door and watches him sleep, plotting his demise. On the 8th night, the old man wakes up, and upon seeing the vulture eye and hearing the beating of his heart, the narrator kills the man by suffocating him with his bed, dismembers him, and places his remains under the floorboards. He is so proud of his doing that when 3 policemen show up at his door, having gotten a complaint of hearing a shriek, he lets them in and encourages them to sit and stay. He places his own chair directly above the old man's dismembered body. While the policemen have no suspicion of him, he begins to hear the beating of the old man's heart beneath the floorboards. It grows louder and louder, and as he grows more paranoid, he admits to the murder and the location of the remains. Now, there are 2 aspects to consider in this case of the old man: the manner of death and the post-mortem injuries inflicted by the narrator. The man was suffocated to death, and post-mortem, his head, arms, and legs were dismembered. Both the cause of death and the post-mortem injury will cause significant issues when it comes to embalming and restoring the remains. The main focus of restoration in this case for me will be reattaching the dismembered limbs and the head. This portion of the restoration of the remains must take place after embalming. This is going to be a more difficult case as we are not dealing with just a decapitation or dismemberment. We are dealing with both legs, both arms, and the head being removed. Luckily, time is one thing we do have on our side in this case. The narrator killed the old man in the night and was caught early in the morning, so the old man had only been dead for a few hours. This allows us to potentially treat the body before advanced decomposition sets in and makes it harder to preserve the remains for restoration. However, embalming will still be tricky. While we would normally embalm by making an incision by the collarbone and raising the right common carotid artery, we cannot preserve any of the limbs or the head through this method, only the trunk. To reattach the limbs, we will need the tissues to be firm and dry, so we will need to embalm the remains first. To embalm the decapitated head and limbs, we will need to locate the arteries in the dismembered limbs and inject arterial solution that way. While we will embalm through the arteries that we are used to raising, including the carotid, femoral, and axillary, we will have to locate them through the side of the limb with the open wound. From there, we can insert the arterial tube, clamp it with a hemostat, and begin injecting arterial solution. Additionally, we will need to embalm the torso of the remains so that the dismembered limbs and head can be successfully reattached. Since the old man will likely be wearing a suit, we will not need to reattach the arms and the legs to the body. Rather, we can cauterize the wounds, wrap them in plastic, and place the embalmed limbs against the remains. Once we have the remains dressed and prepared for the funeral service, the limbs will appear natural, so reattaching the arms and the legs isn't essential. For the head, however, that will take more work. As per our restorative arts textbook, there are a few steps we will need to take after embalming the head. We will reattach the head to the torso using a dowel rod that we pound into the spinal column on one end and introduce the other end to the foramen magnum of the occipital bone. We will also need to cauterize the margins of the injury and then suture the head to the torso using a secure stitch such as the baseball or whip stitch. A thin layer of glue and thin plastic can also go over the wound to keep the head secure and avoid any leaking. Considering the clothing that the old man will be wearing is essential here. If the shirt collar does not cover the incision that the narrator made, we will need to be careful with glue. Using only a little bit of glue ensures that it does not drip from the wound and dry on the skin. At that point, it is almost impossible to remove. Knowing the anatomy of the body, especially of the head and the face, will be essential for properly restoring these remains. For example, knowing where the foramen magnum is, and also knowing that it's the opening for the spinal column to enter the brain, gives us the information that we need to properly reattach the head to the remains. Additionally, it's impossible to tell just from reading the story if the narrator dealt any additional damage to the remains' face. While he doesn't claim to, it's clear that he is an unreliable narrator. It wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility to assume that there are also some broken bones in the face. Since the narrator suffocated the old man with a bed, it is likely that his nose has been broken, so we will need to reset the nose. This can take place before embalming and shouldn't be too difficult. If there are other broken bones in the face, those will need to be restored after embalming, and those will be more challenging than resetting the nose. We will need to have a strong understanding of the anatomy of the head and the bones of the face to determine where bones and bone shards need to go to properly restore the natural form of the face. Placing any of these bones in the wrong spot or not restoring them at all can cause um, an appearance that doesn't look like the old man. This is why proper understanding of the anatomy of the face is crucial for restorative arts. Several aspects of the postmortem dismemberment could also affect the appearance of the remains. The increased pressure due to suffocation could potentially cause the eyes and tongue to swell and bulge. Thankfully, properly embalming the head should help to reduce the swelling. Since the old man was elderly to begin with, dehydration is something we need to consider while embalming the body. We will likely want to have a moderate or strong solution strength, but we also don't want to make it so strong that we dehydrate the tissues any further. Using a co-injection can help here. Adding dye or using an arterial fluid with dye can help as well in this case. Since distribution will be harder to achieve than in a typical case, and it may be harder to notice if the embalming fluid is working as it should, we want to ensure that we can see the solution going underneath the skin. The dye will allow us to ensure the remains are fully embalmed. Another aspect of restorative arts is ensuring natural color as well as natural form. Due to asphyxia, you will likely notice discolorations of the skin. Cyanosis, hard dew spots, and petechia are all likely. Some of these may be effectively removed with proper embalming, while others will need to be cosmetically covered to ensure the remains' color appears natural. It's also important to consider drainage when we examine the remains in the case of the old man. There will be very little to no drainage due to the narrator dismembering the remains and letting the blood pour into a tub. This will leave the remains looking colorless. Additionally, we will also notice postmortem stain due to the asphyxia and the dismemberment. Capillaries may have burst during the suffocation, and if blood entered the tissues, we will not be able to remove that discoloration from the body with embalming. The story does not go into detail as to how the remains were laid underneath the floorboards, but if the head was laid down face first, the postmortem stain could appear on the old man's face. An opaque cosmetic or cauterizing chemicals to bleach the surface of the skin are the only options in this case to return the remains to a natural color. That being said, it is still possible. The Telltale Heart is a gruesome story told from the point of view of a madman. While I hope to never see a case such as this one, I am confident that the remains, as told by Edgar Allan Poe, will not be impossible to restore for an open casket viewing. It will take a lot of work and time to restore the decapitated head and embalm the dismembered limbs, but ultimately, we should be able to restore these remains.